Hi, I'm Laura McCracken, and you're watching my podcast, Cracken's Corner. This is episode 6, Self-Awareness. So before we begin the show, I just wanted to leave a little note. It's kind of being expedited this week because we were surprised with a really awesome invitation to go down the shore for a little 3-day weekend with our family. So I'm recording this early, so if it seems like it's not as fleshed out as they normally are, I do apologize. I still put a lot of effort into writing it, and I hope it's still worthwhile and enjoyable. So thank you for bearing with us, and I hope that you get something out of this. So our topic for this week is self-awareness. I got a great quote about this. Okay, so until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung said that, and Carl Jung was an incredible person if you look into his life and all the stuff that he did. And a lot of his theory in psychology was kind of used actually to help develop the MBTI typology, which is a personality metric that I have found extremely useful and interesting to kind of dive into. I got really into it probably 7-ish years ago, and I've, kind of eased off the brakes of it a little bit, but I've come back into it now again. And just, forewarning, just like any other kind of psychological test, especially anything that you are self-reporting, of course, it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not something intended to somehow limit the way you perceive a person. You're not only your MBTI type. There's obviously a lot more to what makes you who you are than just your personality type or any other aspect of your personality. People are very complex. So when I talk about those sort of things, I don't want you to feel like I think this is the cure-all, because it's not. I mean, nothing really is. It's a combination of factors, but I find it very helpful, so I like to talk about it a lot. So when Jung said this little quote, he calls us out towards self-examination and reflection so we can really appreciate the massive role that self-awareness plays within our own stories. We are not helpless actors in our own lives, and I think that's a great message to have, that we can take control and improve things. The better we come to know ourselves, really our strengths and our shortcomings, the quicker we can try to correct our failings and emphasize the good qualities that we do have, and we can direct our long-term goals towards those things if we have that information. I do believe that the better we know ourselves, who we are, what we want, really what needs to be improved within ourselves, the quicker we can start taking these concrete steps towards achieving our bigger goals in life and our dreams. Whether they're huge things and giant, huge long-term goals, or even just short-term things. It can give you a lot of direction, which is always a good thing. So when I think of who handles the idea of self-awareness well, I think of two particular characters. And at this point, I will warn you, about to reference two very big properties that have been around for a good amount of time. So hopefully you've already seen these things. If not, I guess I'd ask that you stop the video and get through those, or if it's something that you care about. I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones and Avatar: The Last Airbender, both amazing shows with a really cool universe and a lot of lore and a lot of stuff to dig into. But I want to talk about two particular characters from those shows. So the first would be Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones. In the beginning of her story, she kind of starts out, just to give you kind of a quick recap in case you have seen everything. She comes out very naive. She's sheltered. She's living kind of like a princess in her little corner of Westeros in the north. And she sort of loosely dreams about having power that just is acquired through her own natural charm and being whisked away by this, amazing, handsome prince who she believes Joffrey to be. And so then eventually she would become the queen and he would be the king and they would live happily ever after. And she doesn't really have any solid plans or ambition to herself beyond this at that point. And then through her journey, she kind of starts to change immediately as she arrives in King's Landing and later in the Vale of Arryn, and then even later again as she moves back into Winterfell and deals with Ramsay Bolton. She kind of comes to notice how many people in positions of power around her are rather unhinged, power hungry, and, willing to do whatever it takes to stay in control. And that their smiles and their words are often empty. And it kind of wakes her up a lot through many various tragic circumstances to who they really are and how cruel they can be. It gives her a reality check that she really needed. People like Cersei, Joffrey, Lysa Arryn, Ramsay, Littlefinger, all those kind of people. She's quickly relieved of her delusion of a happy ending with somebody like Joffrey when she figures out what he's actually about and sees how cruel he is and how angry he is. She becomes a lot less naive, which is kind of a painful process, but something that's super important, especially for her survival in the story. And she sort of learns what she has to do in order to survive, especially from someone like Littlefinger. And really Cersei, too, even though they had a tumultuous relationship, to eventually grow within herself to become a leader. And through diplomacy, through a lot of strategy, and studying the behavior of these other people around her, she learns how to play off the expectations of those around her who may underestimate her and use it to her own advantage. So then by the end of the story, this girl is not naive. She has ambition, and she kind of learns who she can trust, but especially her own family, and ends up securing independence for the North, which is a huge plot point, obviously with the help of Jon Snow and Daenerys and a whole bunch of other really good characters. And she sets herself up to be kind of like the regional queen of the North in their own independent kind of state. She really comes into her power after enduring these extremely traumatic experiences, and it sort of forces post-traumatic growth, which is a whole other topic I'd like to talk about at another time. But I was like, dang, she really came into her self-awareness through a lot of crazy circumstances, and it was a good example of that in a fictional character. And then my second example would be Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He's kind of one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. I named my rescue cat after him, who is super adorable. So for those who have seen it or who just want a little catch up, a little reminder, in the very beginning of the series, we meet Zuko, and he's this kind of sheltered but very ambitious prince who's striving to win back the approval of his father in the hopes of sitting within the halls of power once again, as he used to. He's really resentful, entitled, ignorant, and projects his failure, or what he thinks is failure, from what his father told him, that he's feeling within himself onto other people, and he lashes out a lot. He's focused on this goal to try to catch the Avatar to regain his honor, and thankfully, luckily, he does have his Uncle Iroh with him almost the entire time, who kind of serves as a strong moral compass and a guide to help him find his way. So then as the story continues in, we see him with Uncle Iroh having these really good conversations and like incredible quotes. This guy always has like the best lines, along with being really funny. Another one of my favorite characters. And he really advises him every step of the way with his best interests in mind, because he sees the potential within Zuko and he knows he has a good heart and just needs like some direction. I would say he's really instrumental in guiding his nephew to shift his perspective away from what he was taught within the halls of, the palace within the Fire Nation, which is a very specific place. And so it kind of forces him out into reality, where he's encouraging him to talk to people from different nations who have very different experiences with the Fire Nation and their soldiers and what they're actually doing. And it sort of forces Zuko to realize the truth about his family and how his father, who's kind of hailed as this amazing overlord who's so powerful and so incredible and doing all this, what needs to be done kind of a thing as a stern leader, is actually kind of a gigantic oppressor. And he opens his eyes to that oppression, which is an extremely powerful message and super relevant even today, probably even more so than other times in history. And he ends up teaming up with his formerly his sworn enemies. And, as a group, they work together and overthrow this whole system. And on the way, he kind of learns how to let go of his pride and his ego and let go of a lot of his anger. And he realizes that he's good enough, and he finds himself worthy of love, like in his love interest, who he eventually marries. He kind of doesn't let his physical appearance and his scars on the outside or on the inside define who he is anymore. By the end of the show, he really comes into his own and, finds himself in a leadership position, but he doesn't abuse that power the way his father did, and he's a lot more ethical about it. And once again, it's kind of another hero who finds himself and grows through trauma, which is awesome, and I think a great portrayal of that. So moving on, I guess, to self-awareness within the framework of my own life. When I was younger, especially like in middle school, I lacked a lot of self-awareness, and I was already a pretty awkward and eccentric kid to start out with. I think I'm still a pretty awkward and eccentric person. I'm just older. I've toned it down probably a lot, maybe because I've gained more self-awareness and gotten better social skills. But especially when you're not really aware of the way that you come off to people and how your behaviors can be seen as weird or strange, and like you get a lot of negative attention because of that, it can be really difficult. And I think I suffered a lot because of that lack of self-awareness at that point in my life. From my habits to the way that I dressed, or just me being like an awkward 12 or 13-year-old dancing around outside in the playground because I wanted to, and that's just what I felt like doing. Just being a free spirit, which isn't too surprising if you know me now. But yeah, I really wish I had learned more self-awareness sooner, because I would have had an easier time at that point in my life. One thing that I can say I've gained from my years of like intense introspection, which goes along a lot with being in therapy, and it's kind of a weird side effect of depression. A lot of times you'll end up just sitting in a room thinking, overthinking everything, analyzing everything, including yourself. And obviously you don't want to do that too much because it's not good for your health, but sort of as a result of my time doing that, I did learn a lot about myself, and I did invest a lot of time into figuring out who I am and what I want and what I believe in, which is a good thing, generally speaking. I ended up getting a lot of perspective about who I am and who I can be from my closest friends, who I've mentioned before. Like, my best friend Pat, I remember him telling me one night when we were like having a really good talk, and he was like, your perspective on the world is extremely holistic. And I thought, man, that's a really good adjective. And I never really saw myself that way. But once he said it, I was like, I think he's right. I think he's hitting something here. Or my best friend Brian pointed out to me how like he would always notice how I would change my behavior depending on who I was dating to better accommodate them, and like to try to almost like to make myself fit in better with that dynamic. And he was like, yeah, like you shouldn't have to do that. Like you're good enough as you are. And kind of like, he can see the difference between how I was then with how I am now with Andy, my husband. And like, it's a totally different thing because he can see I'm actually comfortable with him. And like, he's really happy to see that. And I think that's awesome. I also got a ton of awareness over the years just from like going to psychologists and therapists who would often notice things about yourself that you don't necessarily see from someone else because they're impartial, because they are people who start out as strangers. So they can kind of sometimes notice things that others don't, who are a little too close to see you that way. I remember one of my previous therapists noticed almost within like the first few sessions, she was like, have you ever heard the term an HSP? And I was like, no, what's an HSP? And she's like, oh, a highly sensitive person. You are one. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what that was. I looked into it and I started reading about it. There's like a cool book about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, actually that explains a lot about why I am who I am, and like kind of figuring myself out, and a lot of other people I know who are also HSPs. And I was like, okay, so you're like me in this way, and I'm like you in this way, and like we have something in common here we can learn from. I do feel like I learned a lot about myself from different personality metric tests, particularly the MBTI, Myers-Briggs typology. Obviously, like I said before, none of these tests or practices or whatever are going to be able to include everything about you, because we all live through different things. We all live in different environments. We have different experiences growing up. So this is not something that can completely define anyone. But I have found a lot of truth within the parameters that it kind of sets up, and helps give me a good framework for coming to understand myself and people that I care about better. So I appreciate it a lot. I'm an ENFJ. I would totally encourage you to go take a test. I know there's like a ton of free ones online where you can just do that yourself, or if you would like to, there are professional typologists out there who will offer their services, but I know usually there's like a fee associated with that. I would also recommend things like the Enneagram. I'm a 6 wing 5. I found that pretty interesting. But there's also some other cool ones out there, like the Big 5, that can be very helpful. And kind of some other activities that you can do to gain more self-awareness. Like journaling can be very helpful, especially over time. If you take the time to reflect and read back on where you were in your life at different points and what you were thinking about, you can learn a lot. And the self-authoring program, which is something that I believe Jordan Peterson actually did. I've gotten a lot out of that. I've started it. I haven't finished it. But even just like sitting down and thinking about the narrative of your life, which is something you can also do sometimes in therapy, depending on how your clinician kind of like approaches things, it can give you a lot of insight into why you act the way you do and why you think the way you do. And that's a great thing. Also, this is kind of funny, but so I do really like to try to help cultivate this in like a positive way in other people around me, inadvertently or rather overtly, because I just like to bring people up and increase their happiness if I can in whatever way. So I'm a big dork. And this year, for our fun kind of like summer potluck party thing at work, I had the idea for us to do our own sort of like little award ceremony, kind of loosely based off the idea of the Dundies. Only my thought was they would all be positive traits about each other. And so I kind of like got everybody to just write something nice. I said just something nice about, our coworkers. And it's really interesting to look through and to see what we each notice about each other and like the different perceptions and takeaways that you get all about the same person. And it's been really encouraging to read that, and I'm super excited to be able to share those results pretty soon once we do that and try to like make everyone feel appreciated, because this year plus, has been really hard on us, because everyone in our company has been essential workers. We're all essential workers the entire time. We were open the entire time. We just kept on rolling through this whole pandemic. And I'm so proud of everybody and all the hard work and like serious labor that each person has put in to keep us going. I'm so grateful that we still have a job, to be honest, because I know a lot of places, especially because I do work for a small business. I'm so glad that we were able to stay afloat and keep going and help people throughout this craziness in whatever little way we can. So yeah, so that's just a cool thing, and I totally recommend doing it anywhere, as long as it's all positive and, nice stuff that's going to make people feel good, uplift our spirits and stuff like that, then go for it. So yeah, I guess some new ideas about self-awareness. First, I'd absolutely recommend opening yourself up to honest feedback, which can sometimes include things you don't want to hear, but sometimes the things you don't want to hear are the things you need to hear the most. Hard truths are difficult, but important. And if you're getting them from people that you trust, then generally you can count on them not to be a jerk about it. You can tell the truth without being a jerk most of the time. So I would advise you to ask for honest feedback from people you actually trust and who know you very well, and those who have known you for a long time and feel free enough to be honest with you about the good and the bad, so you can hopefully keep on improving yourself. It's a lifelong thing, I think. Also, I would definitely recommend, if you don't already, talking to a psychologist or a therapist, because generally their feedback kind of just naturally lends itself to helping you gain more self-awareness. So it's been a very helpful thing for me. Also, like I said, the personality tests like the Big Five, Enneagram, MBTI, and a whole bunch of other ones are out there, and most of them that I have used are free, and they're awesome. So they can probably help you learn a little something about yourself and why you do the things you do. So yeah, I would just like to thank everybody for bearing with me and tuning in for this special little broadcast. I really appreciate every subscriber and every little bit of feedback, all the comments, and it really touches my heart hearing from people who do watch this and hearing that it makes a difference, because that's been my goal the whole time. Even though we're a very small channel, just getting that feedback even now, it means a lot, and it just really motivates me to keep going with this and trying to continue to create more content that will continue to help others. So thank you so much. Please, please, please comment, subscribe, all that stuff, share everything, just because it helps us, and I would like to keep building this into something really awesome. So yeah, just thank you once again, and you can send any of that stuff if you have a comment, a question, maybe a topic you want me to talk about. Please send it to our email at CrackensCornerPodcast@gmail.com. We'll have that on the screen as always. Thank you. Have an awesome week ahead. You can do it. You're going to get through whatever you're dealing with. You are not alone. I love you, I care about you, and I hope things are wonderful for you soon. Bye!